Isabella hurried through the wide hallways of the Blackwood mansion, her arms filled with fresh linens. The marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, and her sensible black shoes made almost no sound as she moved quickly to finish her afternoon duties. At 27, she had worked in this house for nearly 2 years, yet she still felt like a ghost, seen but never truly noticed. The mansion belonged to Alexander Blackwood, a 40-year-old tech company owner whose fortune had tripled in the last 5 years. He had bought this house, more like a palace really, after his company went public. Isabella had never seen anyone so comfortable with wealth. Alexander moved through rooms as if he had been born into money, though she had overheard from other staff that he had actually grown up quite poor. Isabella. Mrs. Winters, the head housekeeper, called from the main staircase. Mr. Blackwood has added 10 more guests for tonight's dinner. We need to prepare the East Wing guest bathrooms and set up the grand ballroom instead of the dining room. Isabella nodded, hiding her tiredness behind a practiced smile. Of course, Mrs. Winters, I'll start on the ballroom right away. And he wants fresh flowers everywhere. The florist just delivered them to the kitchen entrance. Another late night, Isabella thought as she changed direction toward the ballroom. These last-minute changes were typical of Mr. Blackwood, who seemed to think that everyone existed solely to fulfill his wishes the moment he had them. The ballroom was Isabella's favorite room in the house, though she rarely admitted this to anyone. While the other staff complained about cleaning its high ceilings and polishing the enormous floor, Isabella loved the room for one reason only: the grand piano that sat in the corner by the tall windows overlooking the garden. She set down her linens and walked over to the instrument, careful not to touch it. The black Steinway concert grand piano gleamed in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the windows. Isabella never dared to play it during working hours, though sometimes, very late at night when everyone else had gone to bed, she would sneak down and let her fingers hover over the keys, not quite pressing them down. The sound of voices from the hallway snapped her back to reality. She rushed to gather the linens and hurried to set up the tables for that night's event. Hours later, Isabella stood against the wall in her freshly pressed black and white uniform, watching the guests arrive for what Mr. Blackwood had described as just a small gathering of friends. Nearly 50 people in expensive clothes now filled the ballroom, laughing and drinking champagne that cost more than Isabella's monthly rent. "Keep the drinks flowing," Mrs. Winters reminded the staff. "And remember, eyes down. Move quickly, be invisible." Isabella carried a silver tray of champagne flutes through the crowd, offering drinks with a polite smile that no one returned. These people looked through her as if she were made of glass. She had grown used to it over the years. This strange power of wealth to make some people visible and others not. Mr. Blackwood stood in the center of the room, telling a story that made everyone around him laugh on cue. He wore a tailored suit that fit him perfectly, his dark hair styled just so, his watch probably worth more than everything Isabella had ever owned in her life. "Another round for everyone," he called out, catching Isabella's eye across the room. He snapped his fingers and pointed at her, then at the empty glasses in his group. As she approached with fresh drinks, she couldn't help glancing at the piano again. A famous musician had been scheduled to play later in the evening, and the piano had been tuned that afternoon. Its lid was raised now, ready for performance, the keys exposed like a row of perfect teeth. "Something interesting over there?" Mr. Blackwood asked, following her gaze. Isabella's cheeks flushed. "No, sir. I'm sorry. Would you like another drink?" He took a glass from her tray, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Do you like music, girl?" The question surprised her. In 2 years, he had never asked her anything personal. "Yes, sir," she answered quietly, hoping he would lose interest. Instead, he smiled, but not kindly. "Everyone," he called out, his voice silencing the room. "My maid here seems very interested in Richard's piano. Perhaps we should let her play something for us before he arrives." Isabella's heart dropped to her stomach. "Oh no, sir, please. I insist," he said, his voice harder now, edged with the certainty of someone who had never been refused anything. "It would be entertaining, wouldn't it, friends? A little pre-dinner amusement." Laughter rippled through the crowd as faces turned toward her. Isabella felt her hands begin to tremble, nearly spilling the remaining champagne on her tray. A woman in a red dress took the tray from her hands. "Go on, darling," she said with a fake smile. "Show us what the help can do." Isabella stood frozen as Mr. Blackwood placed his hand on her back and guided her toward the piano. The crowd parted, some guests whispering behind their hands, others watching with amused curiosity. This was entertainment to them, watching her humiliation. She probably can't even read music, someone whispered loudly enough for her to hear. $10 says she plays chopsticks. Another replied, triggering more laughter. Isabella reached the piano bench, her legs weak beneath her. The room seemed to spin slightly as panic rose in her chest. It had been so long, nearly 5 years since she had played in front of anyone. Not since before the accident. Mr. Blackwood leaned close to her ear. "Don't waste our time, girl. Play something, anything." His breath smelled of expensive champagne and entitlement. Isabella sat down, her uniform dress tight across her shoulders. The keys looked both familiar and foreign under her fingers. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. She could play something simple, make a few mistakes, get it over with. That's what they expected, what they wanted. A clumsy performance they could laugh about later. Remember when Blackwood made his maid play the piano? God, it was awful, but something inside Isabella, some small flame of pride that had nearly been extinguished but still flickered somewhere deep, suddenly sparked. These people, with all their money and power, thought they knew her, thought they could see through her as easily as they looked past her when she served their drinks. They couldn't see her at all. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling their cool smoothness, a sensation so familiar it sent a shiver through her body. Then, without further hesitation, her hands began to move. The first notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor filled the room, soft at first, tentative like raindrops before a storm. Isabella's back straightened as her muscle memory awakened. Her fingers remembered what her mind had tried to forget. The countless hours of practice, the discipline, the joy. The whispers stopped. The laughter died. Isabella didn't notice. She was somewhere else now, somewhere where she wasn't a maid, where there was no accident, no loss, no years of hiding from who she had been. There was only the music, building now, growing more complex. Her hands flying across the keys with the precision and emotion that had once made her teachers predict a brilliant future. The piece rose and fell, telling its story of longing and passion, of heartbreak and hope. Isabella swayed slightly with the music, her eyes half closed, lost in the performance. Her fingers struck the keys with confidence now, creating sounds that filled every corner of the ballroom, bouncing off the high ceilings and washing over the silent crowd. She didn't see Mr. Blackwood's face as it transformed from smug amusement to shock. She didn't notice the glass of champagne frozen halfway to his lips, his eyes wide with disbelief. She didn't see the guests exchange glances of surprise, didn't hear their whispered questions. Who is she? Where did she learn to play like that? The music reached its climactic passage. Isabella's hands a blur of movement, her body now fully surrendered to the piece. The final notes hung in the air like stars, bright and perfect, before fading into a silence so complete it seemed to have weight. Only then did Isabella open her eyes, suddenly aware again of where she was and what she had done. The room remained frozen in silence. 50 pairs of eyes fixed on her with expressions ranging from confusion to awe. Mr. Blackwood stood closest to the piano, his face unreadable now. The smirk was gone, replaced by something Isabella couldn't identify. Perhaps embarrassment, perhaps anger, perhaps something else entirely. She stood quickly, smoothing her apron with shaking hands. "I should get back to work," she whispered, not meeting anyone's eyes. As she stepped away from the piano, the room erupted in applause, hesitant at first, then growing louder, more insistent. Someone called for an encore, but Isabella was already moving through the crowd, head down, cheeks burning. She pushed through the kitchen doors and leaned against the wall, her heart pounding in her chest. What had she done? Years of carefully hiding who she was, of burying her past so deeply that even she sometimes forgot it existed, all undone in a moment of foolish pride. Through the kitchen doors, she could hear the buzz of conversation. Louder now, filled with questions. She knew she should return to her duties, but her legs wouldn't move. On the other side of those doors, something had changed. Mr. Blackwood had seen her, really seen her, for the first time. And Isabella wasn't sure if she was ready for what would happen next. Isabella remained hidden in the kitchen for several minutes, her back pressed against the cool wall, trying to steady her breathing. The other staff members stared at her with a mixture of confusion and newfound interest. "What happened out there?" asked Miguel, one of the waiters. "Everyone's talking about something the maid did." Mrs. Winters pushed through the swinging doors, her face tight with concern. "Isabella," she said in a hushed voice, "and what on earth was that?" Isabella swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Winters. Mr. Blackwood insisted I play the piano. I didn't want to refuse him in front of his guests." "Play the piano?" Mrs. Winters blinked rapidly. "That wasn't just playing the piano, girl. The famous pianist Mr. Blackwood hired for tonight is out there asking who you are. Where did you learn to play like that?" Before Isabella could answer, the kitchen doors swung open again. Alexander Blackwood himself stood in the doorway, something Isabella had never seen in her 2 years working there. The kitchen staff froze, unused to the master of the house entering their domain. "You," he said, pointing at Isabella. His voice wasn't angry, but it held a firmness that made her stomach tighten. "Come with me." Isabella glanced at Mrs. Winters, who gave a small nod. With trembling legs, she followed Mr. Blackwood, out of the kitchen and through a side door that led to his private study, another room she had cleaned countless times but never been invited into. The study was lined with books and smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Mr. Blackwood closed the door behind them and walked to a cabinet, where he poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He handed one to Isabella, who took it automatically, though she never drank on the job. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. Isabella perched on the edge of the seat, the untouched drink cool in her hand. She watched as Mr. Blackwood loosened his tie slightly and took a long sip from his glass before setting it down on the desk between them. "In 2 years," he began, his voice quieter now, "you've cleaned this house, served at my parties, and stood in the background. Not once did you mention you could play like that." He leaned forward. "Why?" Isabella looked down at the drink in her hands. "It wasn't relevant to my job, sir." "Not relevant?" He let out a short laugh that held no humor. "Do you have any idea what I just witnessed out there? People who attend concerts at Carnegie Hall every month are asking me who you are. I'm sorry if I embarrassed you, sir. It won't happen again." "Embarrassed me?" Alexander stood up suddenly, pacing the room. "You didn't embarrass me, Isabella. You surprised me. And I don't like surprises." He stopped and turned to face her. "Who are you, really?" The question hung in the air between them. Isabella had asked herself the same thing many times over the past 5 years. Who was she now? The person she had been training to become had died alongside her family on that rainy highway in Austria. The maid who cleaned Mr. Blackwood's mansion was just a shell she had created to survive. "My name is Isabella Santos," she said quietly. "That much is true. And the piano? Where did you learn to play Chopin like that?" "That wasn't amateur hour, Isabella. That was professional." She took a small sip of the drink, welcoming the burn in her throat. "I studied at the Vienna Conservatory of Music. I was there for 6 years. Alexander's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Vienna? One of the most prestigious music schools in the world?" Isabella nodded, memories flooding back that she had worked so hard to keep at bay. The practice rooms with windows that looked out onto cobblestone streets. The stern but kind professor who had taken a special interest in her talent. The excitement of being selected for the international touring company at just 22. "I had a scholarship," she continued, her voice distant now as she spoke about a life that seemed to belong to someone else. "I was supposed to go on a European tour as a featured soloist. But then there was an accident." She stopped, unable to continue. The glass in her hand trembled slightly. Alexander sat back down, his face softening for the first time. "What kind of accident?" "My parents and younger brother were driving to Vienna to see my final recital before the tour. It was raining. The roads were slick." Isabella closed her eyes briefly. "They never made it." The study fell silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Outside, the party continued, the muffled sounds of laughter and conversation seeping through the heavy door. "After that, I couldn't play anymore," Isabella said. "Every note reminded me of them, of what they would never hear. I left school, came back to America. The money ran out quickly. I took whatever jobs I could find." Alexander watched her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. She had never seen this expression on his face before. Not arrogance or boredom or impatience, but genuine interest. "And you ended up here," he said. "Cleaning my house." "Yes, sir." For 2 years you've been handling my laundry and dusting my shelves when you should have been playing on stages around the world. Isabella's chin lifted slightly. We don't always get what we should have, sir. Life happens. Something flashed in Alexander's eyes. Recognition, perhaps. For a moment, the power dynamic between them shifted, and they were just two people who understood something about loss. Play for me again, he said suddenly. Sir? Not now, tomorrow when the house is quiet. I want to hear you play without the audience, without the theater of tonight. Isabella set her glass down on the desk. Mr. Blackwood, I don't think— Double your salary, he interrupted. If you agree to play the piano for me occasionally. Just when I ask. No audiences if you don't want them. Isabella stared at him in disbelief. You want to pay me to play the piano? Consider it a second job. You'll still have your regular duties, but less of them. Mrs. Winters can redistribute some of your work. Why would you do this? Alexander stood again, turning to look out the window at the garden below. The moon cast silver light on the perfectly manicured hedges and flower beds that Isabella helped tend. Let's just say I appreciate talent, he said, and I've been told I have good business sense. Seems wasteful to have someone with your abilities making beds and polishing silver. Isabella didn't know how to respond. The offer was generous, life-changing even, but something about it made her uneasy. She had spent 5 years running from music, from who she had been, from the pain of her loss. Could she really go back now? Think about it, Alexander said, turning back to face her. His expression had changed again, the momentary vulnerability replaced by his usual controlled demeanor. Now I should get back to my guests. The pianist I hired is probably wondering where I've gone. He walked to the door and opened it, then paused. One more thing, Isabella. Yes, sir. Why that piece? The Chopin. Why did you choose to play that tonight? Isabella hesitated. I didn't really think about it. It was the first piece that came to mind. It's a difficult piece, technically demanding, yes, and you played it perfectly without sheet music, without practice. After 5 years of not playing, he shook his head slightly. That's not just training. That's something else entirely. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving the door open behind him. Isabella sat for a moment longer, the weight of what had just happened settling over her. Then she stood, straightened her uniform, and walked back to the kitchen where Mrs. Winters and the rest of the staff were waiting with curious eyes. Everything all right? Mrs. Winters asked cautiously. Isabella nodded, though nothing felt all right at all. Her carefully constructed world had just been turned upside down by a man who, until tonight, had barely looked at her. Back to work, everyone, Mrs. Winters called. We still have a party to serve. As Isabella picked up a fresh tray of glasses, she caught snippets of conversation from the ballroom. The hired pianist was playing now, skillfully, beautifully, but she could hear people still talking about her performance. Someone asked where the maid with the magical hands had gone. She slipped back into the ballroom, moving along the edges of the crowd as she had been trained to do. This time, though, people noticed her. They watched as she passed, whispering behind their hands. One woman actually stopped her. That was extraordinary, dear, the woman said, her diamonds catching the light as she leaned in close. Where did you study? Before Isabella could answer, Alexander appeared beside them. Mrs. Chen, I see you've met my personal pianist, he said smoothly. Isabella was just helping out this evening. Perhaps at the next gathering she'll favor us with another performance. He looked at Isabella, a question in his eyes. She gave a small nod, surprised at herself. Wonderful, Mrs. Chen exclaimed. I'll be sure to attend. As they walked away, Isabella felt Alexander's hand briefly touch her elbow. Tomorrow, he said quietly. 2:00. The ballroom. Then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd of beautiful people, leaving Isabella standing alone with her tray of empty glasses, wondering what tomorrow would bring and why after 5 years of silence. Her fingers suddenly itched to play again. Isabella barely slept that night. Her small apartment above the garage felt especially cramped as she paced from window to bed and back again, her mind racing with thoughts of what had happened. The memory of her fingers on the piano keys kept returning, the sensation both foreign and achingly familiar. By morning, exhaustion had settled over her like a heavy blanket. She went through her morning duties mechanically, cleaning the guest bathrooms and collecting dirty linens from the night before. The staff whispered as she passed, their curious glances following her down hallways she'd walked 1,000 times before. Is it true you used to be famous? Asked Louisa, one of the younger maids, as they folded sheets together in the laundry room. No, Isabella said quietly. Not famous, just different. At 1:30, Mrs. Winters found her polishing silverware in the kitchen. Mr. Blackwood says you're to be relieved of your duties for the afternoon, the older woman said, her voice betraying her confusion. He says you have an appointment with him at 2. Isabella nodded, setting down the silver fork she'd been polishing. Yes, Mrs. Winters. What's going on, Isabella? First last night and now this? In 15 years working for wealthy families, I've never seen anything like it. Isabella wished she had a simple answer. I'm not sure myself, she admitted. But I think he wants me to play the piano for him. Mrs. Winters raised her eyebrows. Well, whatever it is, don't keep him waiting. Go clean yourself up. Isabella changed out of her work uniform in the small staff bathroom, washing her hands thoroughly to remove any trace of polish. She'd brought a change of clothes, a simple blue dress she normally wore on her days off. Nothing fancy, but at least it wasn't her uniform. Her hands trembled slightly as she brushed her hair and secured it in a neat bun. At precisely 2 o'clock, she stood outside the ballroom doors, gathering her courage. Then she knocked gently and entered. The room looked different in the afternoon light. The mess from the party had been cleaned up. She'd helped with that this morning. And sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting warm rectangles on the polished floor. Alexander stood by the piano examining some sheet music. He wore casual clothes, at least casual for him. Dark trousers and a light blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked up as she entered. Ah, Isabella. Right on time. She walked toward him, feeling strangely self-conscious. Yesterday she had been invisible to this man. Today he watched her approach with keen interest, as if seeing her for the first time. I wasn't sure if you'd come, he said. You're my employer. You asked me to be here. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Yes, but this isn't exactly in your job description, is it? Isabella glanced at the piano. Someone had closed the lid since last night. What exactly do you want from me, Mr. Blackwood? He gestured to the bench. First, I want you to play something. Your choice this time. Isabella hesitated, then slowly sat down at the piano. She lifted the lid and ran her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them, reacquainting herself with their feel. It had been strange enough last night playing in front of a crowd of strangers. Somehow, playing just for him felt even more intimidating. I'm out of practice, she said. That wasn't evident last night. She took a deep breath and began to play. Not Chopin this time, but Bach, a prelude she had learned as a teenager before the conservatory. It was simpler than what she'd played last night, but the familiar notes calmed her nerves. As she played, she forgot Alexander was there, lost in the gentle mathematical precision of Bach's composition. When she finished, she looked up to find Alexander leaning against the piano, watching her with that same intense expression from last night. Beautiful, he said quietly. Different from Chopin. Less dramatic, but no less skilled. Bach requires a different kind of precision, she explained, surprising herself with her willingness to talk about music again. It's like solving a perfect equation. You love it, he observed. The music. Despite everything, you still love it. Isabella closed the lid of the piano gently. Why am I here, Mr. Blackwood? He straightened up and walked to the windows, looking out at the garden. I grew up poor, he said abruptly. Did you know that? She shook her head, though he wasn't looking at her. My father left when I was 4. My mother cleaned houses like you. Sometimes she'd take me with her when she couldn't afford a sitter. He turned to face her. The family she worked for had pianos like this one. Beautiful instruments that collected dust because the children took lessons for a year and then quit. Isabella remained silent, unsure where this conversation was heading. One house had a piano teacher who came every Wednesday for the daughter. I would hide in the hallway and listen to the lessons. After they left, I'd sneak in and try to play what I'd heard. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I was terrible, of course. No training, no real understanding of what I was doing. Just a kid trying to copy sounds. What happened? Isabella asked. The family caught me one day. Instead of firing my mother, the woman offered to let me take lessons alongside her daughter. He shrugged. I lasted 3 months before we had to move to a cheaper apartment too far away to continue. But those 3 months? I never forgot what it felt like to create music. He walked back to the piano and placed his hand on its shiny surface. I couldn't pursue music, but I found other talents. And I promised myself that one day I'd have a house with a piano that didn't collect dust. Isabella felt something shift in her understanding of this man. Is that why you hire musicians for your parties?
Because you love music?
Partly, he acknowledged. And partly because that's what people in my position are expected to do. Culture by association. He looked at her directly now. But what you did last night wasn't about status or appearances. It was pure talent, the kind that can't be bought. Isabella didn't know how to respond to the compliment. I have a proposition for you, Alexander continued, more specific than what I mentioned last night. You already offered to double my salary. This is different. He sat down in a chair near the piano. I want to help you return to music professionally. Isabella felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. What? I have connections in the music world, board members at the symphony, directors of arts foundations. I can open doors that have been closed to you. Why would you do that? Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted cleaning my house. He leaned forward. And because I can. Isabella stood up from the piano bench, suddenly needing distance. You don't understand. I left that world for a reason. I can't go back. Because of your family? Because it reminds you of them? Yes. And does avoiding music honor their memory? Would they want you to abandon your gift? His words struck her like a physical blow. You don't know anything about what they would want, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander's expression softened. You're right. I don't. But I do know something about running from the past. It doesn't work, Isabella. It just follows you. They stood in silence for a long moment, the afternoon sun casting their shadows across the floor. I'm not asking you to decide right now, Alexander finally said, but I want you to think about it. In the meantime, I'd like you to keep playing. Just for yourself if you prefer. Consider it part of your job, and my regular duties. We'll adjust them. Mrs. Winters can redistribute some of your workload. I'll compensate the staff for the additional responsibilities. Isabella shook her head in disbelief. Why are you doing this, really? We barely knew each other existed before last night. Alexander considered her question. Let's just say I recognize something in you. A passion that got buried. I know what that's like. He walked to the door, then paused. Play whenever you want. The piano's yours to use. Think about what I said about returning to music professionally. No pressure, but the offer stands. After he left, Isabella remained in the ballroom staring at the piano. Part of her wanted to run from the room and never return, to go back to the safety of invisibility. But another part, a part that had been silent for 5 long years, whispered that perhaps it was time to stop running. She sat back down at the piano and began to play again, this time a piece she had composed herself during her final year at the conservatory. The notes were rusty in her memory at first, but gradually came back to her, like old friends returning after a long absence. Outside in the hallway, Alexander paused, listening to the music drifting from the ballroom. It wasn't a piece he recognized, something modern, complex yet accessible, with an undercurrent of sadness that made his chest tighten. He smiled slightly and continued walking to his office, already making mental notes of who to call, what strings to pull. In the weeks that followed, the staff of the Blackwood mansion adjusted to a new normal. Isabella still performed many of her regular duties, but each afternoon she disappeared into the ballroom for several hours. Sometimes Alexander joined her, sitting quietly in a chair by the window while she played. Other times she played alone, rediscovering pieces she had once known by heart. Mrs. Winters stopped Isabella one evening as she was leaving. Whatever's happening with you and Mr. Blackwood, the older woman said, be careful. Men like him, they can change their minds quickly. It's not what you think, Isabella assured her. He's just interested in the music. Mrs. Winters gave her a skeptical look. I've worked for wealthy men for a long time, dear. It's never just about the music. Isabella thought about those words as she walked to her apartment that night. Was there more to Alexander's interest than he was saying? She couldn't deny that something had changed between them. He spoke to her differently now, not as an employer to staff, but almost as an equal. Sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, and more troubling, she found herself looking forward to their afternoon sessions, to the moments when he would ask questions about a particular piece or composer, showing a genuine curiosity that surprised her. As she reached her apartment door, she realized that for the first time in 5 years, she had gone a whole day without being consumed by grief. The music was filling spaces inside her that had been empty for so long, not erasing her loss, but somehow making it possible to carry. She wondered what her family would think of Alexander Blackwood and his unexpected interest in her talent. Her father had always been suspicious of wealthy people with sudden generosity. "Look for the strings attached," he used to say. Isabella wasn't naive. She knew there must be strings somewhere. She just couldn't see them yet. A month passed. Summer turned to early fall, and the gardens of the Blackwood mansion bloomed with chrysanthemums and dahlias in rich autumn colors. Isabella's days had taken on a new rhythm, mornings spent on her reduced cleaning duties, afternoons devoted to the piano. Her fingers had regained their strength and flexibility, and music once again filled the empty spaces in her life. On a crisp Tuesday morning, Isabella was dusting the library when Alexander appeared in the doorway. This no longer surprised her. Their paths crossed more frequently now, their conversations less formal. "Isabella," he said, holding an envelope in his hand. "Do you have a moment?" She set down her feather duster. Of course, he handed her the envelope. Inside was an invitation printed on thick cream-colored paper. "A charity event at the Symphony Hall," Alexander explained. "This Friday evening. They've asked me to attend as a major donor." Isabella looked up at him, confused. "And you're inviting me to go with you?" "Not exactly." He gestured to the invitation. Read the whole thing. She scanned the elegant text and stopped at a line near the bottom. Her heart skipped a beat. "Special performance by guest pianist Isabella Santos," she read aloud, her voice barely audible. "I took the liberty of submitting a recording of you playing," Alexander said. "Just a simple phone recording from one of our sessions. The artistic director was impressed enough to offer you a 10-minute slot during the pre-dinner reception." Isabella's hands trembled as she put the invitation back in its envelope. "You recorded me without telling me? Would you have agreed if I'd asked?" "No." "Exactly." Alexander leaned against a bookshelf, his expression a mixture of triumph and caution. "It's a small step. A friendly audience, a short program. The perfect way to re-enter the music world." Isabella shook her head. "I never agreed to re-enter anything. Our arrangement was private, just playing for myself and sometimes for you." "Isabella," Alexander said softly, "you've been playing for hours every day for a month. You've been pulling out your old repertoire, practicing the same passages over and over until they're perfect. That's not someone playing just for herself." She couldn't deny it. The past month had awakened something in her, a hunger she thought had died with her family. Each day she found herself pushing further, reaching for the technical precision and emotional depth that had once defined her playing. "I'm not ready for an audience," she insisted. "You're more than ready. You're just scared." "And what if I am?" Her voice rose slightly. "I have every right to be scared. You have no idea what it feels like to lose everything, to have your whole future wiped away in a single moment." Alexander's face hardened. "Don't I?" The question hung between them, a reminder of his own hinted at past struggles. "I'm sorry," Isabella said. "That was unfair. But this," she held up the envelope, "this is too much, too soon." "Friday is 3 days away," Alexander said. "Think about it until tomorrow. If you decide not to do it, I'll call and cancel. No pressure, no consequences for our arrangement here." He turned to leave, then looked back. "But Isabella, for what it's worth, I believe you're ready, more than ready." After he left, Isabella sank into one of the library's leather chairs, the invitation clutched in her hand. Performing in public again? The thought made her stomach twist with anxiety. But underneath the fear was something else. A tiny flicker of excitement, of longing. That evening, instead of returning to her apartment, Isabella went to the ballroom. The mansion was quiet, most of the staff gone for the day. She sat at the piano in the gathering dusk and played softly, trying to imagine facing an audience again. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't hear the footsteps approaching until a voice spoke from the doorway. "That's beautiful," said a woman Isabella had never seen before. She was tall and elegant, perhaps in her 60s, with silver hair cut in a stylish bob. "Debussy, isn't it?" "Claire de Lune?" Isabella stood quickly. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize anyone was here. Are you looking for Mr. Blackwood?" The woman entered the room smiling. "No, I'm looking for you, actually. I'm Elaine Parker." The name struck Isabella like a thunderbolt. Elaine Parker, the renowned pianist and teacher, former chair of the piano department at Juilliard. A legend in the classical music world, But why would you? Alexander called me, Elaine said simply. He played me a recording of you. I was intrigued enough to drive up from the city. Isabella shot a betrayed look toward the door, half expecting Alexander to appear. He shouldn't have bothered you. I'm not a professional anymore? That's what he said. Elaine walked to the piano and ran her fingers lightly over the keys. He also told me your story. About Vienna. About your family. Isabella felt a flash of anger that Alexander had shared her private pain with a stranger. Then you understand why I left music behind? Elaine nodded. I do. I lost my husband 20 years ago. I didn't play for almost a year afterward. She looked directly at Isabella. But eventually I realized that music was the only thing that could help me carry my grief. It gave me a place to put all the love I could no longer give to him. The words resonated deep within Isabella. Wasn't that what she'd been feeling these past weeks? That the music wasn't erasing her loss, but somehow making it bearable? May I hear you play? Elaine asked. Something of your choosing. Isabella hesitated, then sat down at the piano again. After a moment's thought, she began playing Schubert's Impromptu in G-flat major, a piece full of warmth and gentle melancholy that had always reminded her of her mother. As she played, she was aware of Elaine watching her, but the woman's presence wasn't intimidating as she had expected. Instead, it felt like a conversation between two people who spoke the same language. When she finished, Elaine was silent for a long moment. You have a rare gift, she finally said. Not just technical skill, many people have that, but a voice. Your playing tells a story. Thank you, Isabella whispered. Alexander mentioned a charity event this Friday. Elaine sat in a chair near the piano. Are you going to play? I don't know. It's been so long since I performed in public. What are you afraid of? The question was direct, without judgment. Isabella considered it seriously. I'm afraid I'll fail, that I'm not the pianist I used to be. She paused. And I'm afraid it will hurt too much, playing without them there to hear it. Elaine nodded. Both valid fears. But what if there's something worse than either of those things? What do you mean? What if the worst thing isn't failing or hurting, but never trying at all? Never knowing what might have been possible. Elaine leaned forward. Music isn't just about performance, Isabella. It's about connection. With ourselves, with others, with something larger than all of us. When a musician with a true gift stops playing, that connection is lost. Not just for them, but for everyone who might have heard them. The words settled over Isabella like a gentle weight. I'm not saying you have to play on Friday, Elaine continued, or ever again in public if that's your choice. But I am saying that choices made from fear rarely lead us where we need to go. A soft knock on the door interrupted them. Alexander stood there, his expression careful, uncertain. I see you two have met, he said. Elaine stood. Yes, and I've taken up enough of Isabella's time. Think about what I said. She handed Isabella a card. Call me if you want to talk more. After she left, Alexander remained in the doorway, not quite entering the room. I should have told you she was coming. I'm sorry. Isabella was surprised to find her anger had faded. Why did you call her? Because you needed to hear from someone who understands the music world better than I do. Someone who could see your talent through professional eyes. And because I thought she might help you decide about Friday. He took a step into the room. Have you? Isabella looked down at Elaine's card in her hand. I'm still thinking, Alexander nodded. Fair enough, he turned to leave. Why are you doing all this? Isabella called after him. The truth this time. He stopped, his back to her. For a moment she thought he might not answer. When I was 12, he finally said. After those piano lessons ended, I used to imagine what my life might have been like if I'd had the chance to continue, if someone had seen whatever small talent I had and nurtured it. He turned to face her. No one did. And eventually I found other paths. But sometimes I wonder what might have been possible. Isabella said softly, echoing Elaine's words. Yes. Alexander's expression was more open than she had ever seen it. I can't go back and change my own story, but maybe in some small way I can be part of changing yours. The simple honesty of his answer surprised her. For the first time, she saw beyond the wealthy, powerful man to someone who understood loss and missed chances. I'll play on Friday, she said suddenly. the decision crystallizing as she spoke. Just a short program like you said. Alexander's face brightened. You're sure? No, she admitted with a small laugh. I'm terrified. But I think it's time to find out what's still possible. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Isabella selected 3 pieces for her program, Bach, Chopin, and one of her own compositions. She practiced whenever she could, sometimes with Elaine, who returned to offer guidance, sometimes alone in the quiet of early morning or late evening. Alexander kept his distance, seemingly aware that she needed space to prepare, but she would sometimes look up from the piano to find him standing in the doorway listening, a small smile on his face. On Friday afternoon, as she was getting ready to leave for the symphony hall, a package arrived for her. Inside was a simple but elegant black dress with a note in Alexander's handwriting. For tonight. No pressure to wear it if you have something else. The dress fit perfectly, modest yet sophisticated, exactly what a classical pianist might wear for a performance. Isabella wondered how he had known her size, then remembered Mrs. Winters had access to such information for all the staff. As she slipped the dress on, Isabella caught her reflection in the mirror. For the first time in 5 years, she recognized the woman looking back at her. Not just a maid who had once been a pianist, but a pianist who had temporarily been a maid. Thank you, she whispered, though no one was there to hear. The symphony hall glowed with warm light as Isabella stood backstage, her hands cold despite the mild evening. Through a gap in the curtains, she could see the reception area filling with people in formal attire. Wealthy donors, music lovers, and arts patrons mingling with glasses of champagne. Somewhere among them was Alexander, though she hadn't seen him since arriving. 5 minutes, Miss Santos, said a young stagehand, clipboard in hand. Isabella nodded, unable to find her voice. The familiar pre-performance jitters she had known so well in her conservatory days had returned, but now they were magnified by 5 years of silence and the weight of all this night represented. You look beautiful, said a voice behind her. She turned to find Alexander standing there, handsome in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. It was strange to see him here, away from the mansion where their unusual relationship had developed. Thank you for the dress, she said. It's perfect. How are you feeling? He asked, keeping a respectful distance. Terrified, she admitted. I think I might be sick, he smiled. You won't be. Once you start playing, everything else will fall away. That's what you told me happens, remember? She had said that during one of their afternoon sessions when he'd asked what it felt like to perform. The fact that he remembered her exact words touched her. Alexander, she began, not sure what she wanted to say. There was so much unspoken between them, gratitude, confusion, and something else she wasn't ready to name. Miss Santos, we're ready for you. The stagehand interrupted. Alexander reached out and briefly squeezed her hand. I'll be right in the front. Just play for yourself like you do in the ballroom. Then he was gone, slipping back through the curtain to take his seat, and Isabella was following the stagehand to the gleaming grand piano that waited center stage. The reception crowd quieted as the artistic director made a brief introduction, mentioning her training in Vienna, but not her recent years as a maid. That had been part of her agreement with Alexander. Her current employment situation would remain private, and then she was alone at the piano, facing an audience for the first time in 5 years. The spotlight felt hot, the silence expectant. Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. When she opened them, she saw Alexander in the front row, his expression calm and confident. Beside him sat Elaine Parker, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. Isabella placed her hands on the keys and began to play. She started with Bach, as planned, a prelude that built slowly, its mathematical patterns creating a framework that helped settle her nerves. As her fingers found their rhythm, a strange thing happened. The audience seemed to recede and the music came forward, wrapping around her like an old friend. She moved from Bach to Chopin, the same piece she had played that first night when Alexander had mockingly asked her to entertain his guests. But tonight there was no mockery, only rapt attention as the notes filled the hall. For her final piece, she paused, her hands hovering above the keys. She had planned to play one of her own compositions from her conservatory days, but suddenly that didn't feel right. Instead, she began something new, a piece she had been working on privately these past weeks. It had no title yet, but in her mind she called it After Loss. The melody was simple at first, tentative, like someone finding their way in darkness. Then it grew, adding layers of complexity and emotion, grief intertwined with hope, loss with the possibility of renewal. As she played, Isabella felt tears on her cheeks but didn't stop. This piece was for her family, for the life she had lost, and perhaps for the new one she was finding. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then applause erupted, not polite reception clapping, but genuine, enthusiastic appreciation. Isabella stood blinking in the spotlight and gave a small bow before quickly leaving the stage. Backstage, she leaned against a wall, her heart pounding. She had done it. After 5 years of silence, she had played for an audience again, and not just played, but shared something deeply personal. The backstage door opened, and Alexander appeared. Without a word, he wrapped his arms around her in a warm embrace. Isabella stiffened in surprise, then relaxed, allowing herself to accept the comfort he offered. "That was," he began, pulling back to look at her. "Isabella, I've heard you play many times now, but never like that. The last piece especially, what was it?" "Something new," she said softly. "Something I've been working on." It was extraordinary. His hand still rested lightly on her shoulders. "You're extraordinary." Before she could respond, the door opened again and Elaine entered, followed by several people Isabella didn't recognize. "Isabella? Darling, that was magnificent," Elaine said, embracing her. "I'd like you to meet some people." She gestured to the small group. "This is Robert Chen, director of the Chamber Music Society. And this is Diane Lopez from the Eastman School of Music, and Thomas Wright from Wright Artist Management." Isabella shook hands in a daze as Alexander stepped back, watching with a small smile as these influential music world figures praised her performance and asked questions about her background and future plans. "We should let Miss Santos catch her breath," Alexander finally intervened, noticing her overwhelmed expression. "Perhaps continue these conversations during dinner?" As the group reluctantly moved toward the dining room, Elaine lingered behind. "They're impressed," she told Isabella, "particularly with your original composition. Robert is already talking about a chamber music engagement. And Thomas wants to discuss representation. It's all happening so fast," Isabella said. "That's how it works when you have real talent," Elaine replied with a smile. "Think about what you want, dear. No rush, no pressure. But know that the door is open now." After Elaine left, Isabella turned to Alexander. "Did you plan all this? The music directors, the agent?" "I invited them," he admitted. "But their reaction to your playing, that was all you." They walked together toward the dining room, Isabella still processing everything that had happened. "What now?" Alexander asked quietly. "Will you go back to performing? Teaching, perhaps?" Isabella considered the question. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to rush forward, make up for lost time, but another part is scared of moving too fast. Whatever you decide, your job at the mansion is secure. If you want to keep playing just in the ballroom, that's fine. If you want to pursue these opportunities while still living on the grounds, that works too." He paused. "And if you want to leave and restart your career completely, I'll understand." The thought of leaving the mansion, leaving him, created an unexpected pang in her chest. Their relationship had transformed so dramatically in the past month. From employer and maid to, what exactly, friends? Mentor and protege? Something else entirely. "I need time to think," she said honestly, "of course." He opened the door to the dining room for her. "Tonight, just enjoy the moment. You've earned it." The dinner passed in a blur of conversations and congratulations. Isabella found herself seated at the main table between Alexander and Elaine, across from Robert Chen, who spoke enthusiastically about upcoming chamber music programs. "We have a series of Sunday afternoon concerts starting next month," he explained. "Nothing too demanding, just 1 or 2 pieces per program. It would be a perfect re-entry into performing." "I'd need to prepare," Isabella said cautiously. "Of course, take a few weeks, but I hope you'll consider it." By the time dessert was served, Isabella had received 3 distinct offers: the chamber music series, a guest teaching position at Eastman for the spring semester, and a meeting with Thomas Wright to discuss limited representation. "People are excited about your story," Elaine explained quietly. the prodigy who disappeared from Vienna and has now re-emerged. It's compelling, Isabella frowned. I don't want to be defined by tragedy. Then don't be, Alexander said, overhearing. Define yourself by your music instead. That last piece you played tonight, that's who you are now. Someone who has experienced loss but created beauty from it. His words stayed with her throughout the evening and on the drive home. Alexander had arranged for a car service, allowing her space to think as she watched the city lights give way to the darker countryside, where the Blackwood mansion stood. When they arrived, Alexander walked her to her apartment above the garage. Thank you, she said, stopping at her door, for everything. For making me play that first night even though your reasons weren't exactly kind. He had the grace to look embarrassed. Not my finest moment. For giving me back something I thought was gone forever, she continued. I don't know what happens next, but whatever it is, it's because of you. Alexander shook his head. No, it's because of you, Isabella. All I did was create an opportunity. You're the one who had the courage to take it. In the soft porch light, his expression was open, almost vulnerable. Isabella realized how much had changed between them, how the barriers of employer and employee, wealthy man and maid, had gradually dissolved, revealing two people who understood something essential about each other. Good night, Alexander, she said softly. Good night, Isabella. 6 months later, Isabella sat at the piano in the Blackwood Mansion ballroom, working through a difficult passage in a new composition. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the music sheets spread across the piano. Her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. She still lived in the apartment above the garage, but she was no longer a maid. Instead, she divided her time between teaching at a local music school, performing monthly with the Chamber Music Society, and composing. The door opened, and Alexander entered with 2 cups of coffee. Stuck again? He asked, setting 1 cup near her. The transition to the middle section isn't working, she sighed, taking a grateful sip of coffee. Their relationship had evolved into a comfortable partnership. Not quite romance, though there were moments when it seemed to lean in that direction. Not quite friendship, though there was genuine affection between them. Something unique, built on mutual respect and a shared love of music. Play it for me, he suggested, sitting in his usual chair by the window. Isabella played the troublesome section, watching as Alexander closed his eyes to listen more intently. His ear had developed remarkably over these months as he'd attended her rehearsals and performances, learning alongside her. It's trying too hard, he said when she finished. The first part is so natural, and then this section feels forced, like you're overthinking it. She nodded, recognizing the truth in his observation. You're right. I need to let it breathe more. She started again, simplifying the transition, letting the melody find its own path. This time it flowed naturally into the middle section. Alexander smiled. That's it. Isabella continued playing, the piece taking shape beneath her fingers. It was a composition for the anniversary concert in Vienna, her return to the place where she had last performed before the accident. The director had reached out after hearing about her re-emergence, offering her a special slot in the program. She had hesitated until Alexander suggested they make it a memorial for her family. Turn it into something healing, he had said. A tribute, not just a return. As she played the final notes, she glanced at Alexander, who was watching her with that expression she had come to know well. Part pride, part wonder. Will you come to Vienna? She asked suddenly. For the concert? If you want me there. I do, she said, realizing how much she meant it. Very much. He smiled, and in that moment, Isabella knew that whatever path her music took her on next, it would somehow lead back here to this room, this piano, and this man who had once mockingly made the maid play, only to find himself transformed by what he heard. Then I'll be there, he said simply. In the front row, Isabella turned back to the piano, adding a few notes to her score. The music was her voice now, speaking of loss and renewal, of endings and beginnings, of two people from different worlds finding unexpected harmony. Outside, the garden bloomed with spring flowers. Inside, the piano sang with possibility. And between the notes, a new story was still being written.